Kilij is a type of one-handed, single-edged and moderately curved saber used by the Turks and related cultures throughout history starting from the late Hsiung-nu period to the time of the Avar Empire and the Gar paragraph Kta 1/4 Khaganate, Uyghur Khaganate, Seljuk Empire, Timurid Empire, Mamluk Empire, Ottoman Empire, and the later Turkic Khanates of Central Asia and Eurasian steppes. These blades evolved from Turko-Mongol sabers that had been used over all the lands invaded and/or influenced by the Turkic peoples. History Etymology The Turkish root verb kar plus or minus a means to break with the suffix inus section makes kar plus or minus ra plus or minus na section becomes kar plus or minus la plus or minus na section, then kar plus or minus la plus or minus a section. The Kilij became the symbol of power and kingdom. For example, Seljuk rulers carried the name Kilij Arslan means sword lion. Origins The Central Asian Turks and their offshoots began using curved cavalry swords beginning from the late Hsiung-nu period. The earliest examples of curved, single-edged Turkish swords can be found associated with the late Hsiung-nu and Göktürk empires. These swords were made of pattern-welded high-carbon crucible steel, generally with long slightly curved blades with one sharp edge. A sharp back edge on the distal third of the blade known as Yeoman, or Yeoman was introduced during this period. In the early Middle Ages, the Turkic people of Central Asia came into contact with Middle Eastern civilizations through their shared Islamic faith. Turkic Yeoman slave soldiers serving under the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates introduced Kilij-type sabers to all of the other Middle Eastern cultures. Previously, Arabs and Persians used straight-bladed swords such as the earlier types of the Arab Sef, Takuba and Kaskara. During a Islamization of the Turks, the Kilij became more and more popular in the Islamic armies. When the Seljuk Empire invaded Persia and became the first Turkic Muslim political power in Western Asia, Kilij became the dominant sword form. The Iranian Shamshir was created during the Turkic Seljuk Empire period of ran. After the invasion of Anatolia, the sword type was carried by Turkoman tribes to the future seat of the Ottoman Empire. During the Crusades, Turks of Anatolia were the first target to be attacked by the European armies, and their curved swords were misperceived by Europeans as the imaginative scimitar of the Saracens, the generic sword type for all Orientals. Evolution of Ottoman Kilij The Kilij, as a specific type of saber associated with the Ottoman Turks and the Mamluks of Egypt, was recognizable by the late 15th century. The oldest surviving examples sport a long blade curving slightly from the hilt and more strongly in the distal half. The width of the blade stays narrow up until the last 30% of its length, at which point it flares out and becomes wider. This distinctive flaring tip is called a yeoman, and it greatly adds to the cutting power of the sword. Ottoman sabers of the next couple of centuries were often of the Seljuk variety, though the native Kilij form was also found. Iranian blades were fitted with Ottoman hilts. These hilts normally had slightly longer quillons to the guard, which was usually of brass or silver, and sported a rounded termination to the grips, usually made of horn, unlike that seen on Iranian swords. The finest mechanical Damascus and Wu steel were often used in making of these swords. In the classical period of the Ottoman Empire, Bursa, Damascus and the Derbent regions became the most famous swordsmithing centers of the empire. Turkish blades became a major export item to Europe and Asia. In the late 18th century, though shamshirs continued to be used, the Kilij underwent an evolution. The blade was shortened, became much more acutely curved, and was wider with an even deeper yeoman. In addition to the flared tip, these blades have a distinct T-shaped cross-section to the back of the blade. This allowed greater blade stiffness without an increase in weight. Because of the shape of the tip of the blade and the nature of its curvature, the Kilij could be used to perform the thrust. In this it had an advantage over the shamshir whose extreme curvature did not allow the thrust. Some of these shorter Kilij are also referred to as pala, but there does not seem to be a clear-cut distinction in nomenclature. After the auspicious incident, the Turkish army was modernized in the European fashion and Kilijs were abandoned for Western-type cavalry sabers and small swords. This change, and the introduction of industrialized European steels to Ottoman market, created a great decline in traditional swordsmithing. Civilians in the provinces and county militia continued to carry handmade kilijs as a part of their traditional dress. A degree in the late 19th century, Sultan Abdülhamid II's palace guards, the Ertuğrul Brigade, carried traditional kilijs as a romantic nationalistic revival of the earlier Ottoman Turkoman cavalry raiders. This sentiment continued after dethronement of the Sultan by the nationalist Young Turks. High-ranking officer dress saber of early 20th century was a modern composite of traditional Kilij, Mamluk, and European cavalry saber. Adoption by Western armed forces. Following the Ottoman invasion of Balkans, European armies were introduced to the Kilij, though Greeks, Russians, Ukrainians, Poles, other Slavs and Hungarians were not strangers to this sword type from their earlier encounters with Turkic nomads such as Bulgars, Khazars, Peshmergas, Kumans and Tatars. Russian Cossacks and the peoples of the Caucasus adopted a variation of nomadic Tatars' Kilij as the Shashka. The Kilij first became popular with the Balkan nations and the Hungarian Hussar cavalry after 15th century, the saber taking the name of Sobla. Around 1670, the Karabela was evolved, based on Janissary Kilij sabers. It became the most popular sword form in the Polish army. During 17th and 18th centuries, curved sabers that evolved from Turkish Kilij were widespread throughout Europe. As the Mamluks were of Turkish descent, the Egyptians bore Turkish sabers for hundreds of years. During the Napoleonic Wars, the French conquest of Egypt brought these beautiful and functional swords to the attention of the Europeans. This type of saber became very popular for light cavalry officers, in both France and Britain, and became a fashionable sword for senior officers to wear. In 1831 the Mamluk, as the sword was now called, became a regulation pattern for British general officers. The American victory over the rebellious forces in the citadel of Tripoli in 1805 during the First Barbary War, led to the presentation of bejeweled examples of these swords to the senior officers of the U.S. Marines. Officers of the U.S. Marine Corps still use a Mamluk pattern dress sword. Although some genuine Turkish Kilij sabers were used by Westerners, most Mamluk sabers were manufactured in Europe. Their hilts were very similar in form to the Ottoman prototype, however, their blades, even when an expanded Yeoman was incorporated, tended to be longer, narrower and less curved than those of the true Kilij. Terminology. The Turkish language has a rich terminology involving swords, swordsmithing, parts and types of blades. Below is listed some of the terminology about names of the main parts of a Kilij and scabbard in order of the term, literal translation of the Turkish word, and its equivalent in English terminology of swords. In popular culture, the Kilij was featured in an episode of The Spike Show, Deadliest Warrior, in which Vlad the Impaler fought Sun Tzu. The damage caused by the sword was compared to a jam, and was voted by the show's commentators as the most destructive one-handed sword on the show. In Assassin's Creed, Revelations, Yusuf Tazim has a Turkish Kilij as his personal weapon. The Kilij is one of the curved sword-type weapons in From Software's cult hit video game Demon's Souls. In Season 5 of the television adaptation of Game of Thrones, Dornish cavalry are shown using a Kilij-style sword as a standard sidearm in addition to their ubiquitous spear. See also, Dao, Mamluk sword, a derivative of the Kilij, Pulwa, Sef, Shamshir, Tulwa, Yakagan, another distinctive Turkish sword, saber, Sobla, scimitar. Notes. References, Stone, G.C. and La Rocca, D.J. A Glossary of the Construction, Decoration and Use of Arms and Armor in All Countries and in All Times. Courier Dover Publications. ISBN 0-486-40726-8. A.G.E.L., Bohadin, tar 1/4 a k car plus or minus la plus or minus car plus or minus na plus or minus and menave tech armor 1/4 la 1/4 hacker plus or minus da, a or. DTCF Dergisi, 6, 1948, The Kilij and Shamshir. Turkish and Persian Sabers. External links